our minigaming YouTube video, and we are continuing once again in our narrative review series. And this one I am very excited for. This is the final segment of the first. GW actually announced that they'll be doing others. I guess this one did well enough that they've considered it a good enough investment. This is the end of the first of the GW audio drama series for the Age of Sigmar. That this one was about Lord Tarsis and his Bull-hearts. Excuse me. And just briefly, kind of touching back on the story of the prior ones, Tarsis and his warrior chamber had been sent to the realm of death to seek out Nagash and basically deliver a message to him from Sigmar to try to reforge an alliance between the two, because Sigmar's ultimate goal is to unite all the realms together against chaos, to drive chaos back. And in the first book, or the first segment, they encounter Manfred and free him, and Manfred swears that he will travel alongside them and help them out. And they don't really trust him, but they say okay. And then in the second segment, they continue on and kind of discover that, or at least the Stormcast come to learn that the way into the underworld of the realm of death, where Nagash is kind of in hiding at the moment, moves about. The portal for it moves about, and there's 9 of these portals, and they each last 9 months in terms of their total lifetime, and then as each portal dies, a new one spawns somewhere else. So that's why Chaos has been unable to find their way in. In the third one, they find the relic that they need, which is a sword, which is the fang of something. I can't remember the name. It's unimportant. The name, I mean, beyond the fang, that allows them to find where these gates are at all times, and they do that successfully. And in this time, they come across the city of Hellstone, which was Tarsis's homeland, or his home city, before he died and came back as a Stormcast Eternal. And so finally we're here. In the very beginning of this, we see Tarsis and Manfred and their forces walking along, and they encounter Tzeentch, Nurgle, and Khorne forces all fighting each other. And they don't really seem to care about the Stormcasts. They don't really notice them. They're too busy waging war against each other because they're basically bored. And this is kind of interesting because this is the first time in any of the realms that we've actually seen the 3 main Chaos Gods that are still around. Obviously, Slaanesh right now is missing. And the Horned Rat kind of doesn't yet have a full-fledged seat at the big kids table. So we don't really see any Skaven here either. But for the 3 main ones that are left in Age of Sigmar, this is the first realm that we've seen all 3 of them. So that's definitely significant. I don't know if that means that there will be other things later on that are revealed that's like, hey, the realm of death is like especially important because of X, Y, and Z. But they've certainly set that up. Most of the other realms have only had 1 of the different Chaos Gods servants in them. Yeah, the Death was the first one to actually have 2. But this is with Nurgle appearing in the 3rd section of the story, and Khorne in the first 2. But this one also mentions Tzeentch troops specifically. So that's significant. But anyways, the Stormcast pass by them completely unhindered. They're not attacked or anything, because again, they just don't. The Chaos Forces don't seem to give a care. And they arrive at this. The Stormcast do. They arrive at the gate finally, which is in this like giant chasm, basically similar to the Grand Canyon, you know. And as they near it, all these, you know, undead come to life. All these skeletons, all these, you know, all these undead troops of Nagash, and these troops are actually all former Chaos Warriors that found the gate but were not able to enter because they were killed. And so basically their punishment is to forever travel with the gate but never actually manage to go inside of it. So the Stormcast get in this big battle, and you learn in this how few Stormcast are still alive, that there's probably less than 60, or about 60 at this point, that have survived thus far. And they fight through, and they're, first they're too bogged down, they can't get through, and Tarsis, through his, tactical aptitude, devises a plan to basically use the Retributors to smash a way through and kind of form a spearhead, and they do, and they manage to crash right through into this portal and walk through it, and they turn around, and the dead, of course, are not following, because, as I just said, Manfred then explains to them that they're never allowed to enter. So Manfred basically says then, we have multiple routes that we can take to get to Nagash. What way do you want to go? And Tarsis is like, look, I've lost too many of my troops. I have less than 30 left because about 30 died just getting into the portal. We need to take the most direct route and just get there. We can't be playing any more games. And Manfred's like, well, we'll do that, but I'm going to warn you, that's the most dangerous path of all. Tarsis says, I don't care, let's go. And so they do. And they come to this bridge after a little bit. There's not really much that's described between the entrance and when they get to this bridge. There's a little bit that's describing like a passage of time, and that there's like bats and stuff around. Excuse me. But there's not really much detail there. It's just kind of giving you this feeling of setting the mood of how dark and eerie this place is. So anyways, they arrive at this this bridge, and they see 7 statues, and obviously that's where this book gets its title from. And these statues are all 7 women that look like they were basically turned to stone in the midst of agony, and so they appear both regal and in pain at the same time. And Manfred explains that these were the 7 queens of these 7 kingdoms before Nagash came, and whenever Nagash came, they basically offered to trade their entire kingdom's lives to keep themselves alive, and Nagash kind of was like, okay, and then killed them anyways and turned them into stone. And as they begin to cross the bridge, all of a sudden this voice booms out, and this figure walks out onto the bridge from the opposite end, basically telling them, leave, you're trespassing. And it's Archon the Black, who also has a dread abyssal like Manfred, because he is one of the Mortarchs of Nagash. And Manfred's all like, bows up and says, I've beat you before, I'll beat you now, get out of my way, Archon. And Archon's like, nope, sorry, not gonna happen, I'm loyal. I'm not a traitor like you, I'm not a coward like you, I don't understand fear, because I'm dead. So I'm gonna whoop up on you, and you're gonna finally be fully put to death, Manfred, like you should have been so long ago. And with that, Archon basically summons those 7 statues to life, and they all turn into banshees, and the banshees begin to attack the Stormcasts, and Archon and Manfred begin their fight, and the Stormcast are hard pressed because these banshees are just, they're incorporeal creatures that are just screaming, and their screams are literally enough to kill Stormcasts, and so some of the Stormcasts are dying, and they're all of them that aren't immediately dying from either the blades or the screams of these banshees are basically knocked to the ground, clutching at their heads, cowering, they're just so overwhelmed by it that even the best amongst them in Tarsis is having a hard time, not just basically going unconscious. And while this is happening, Manfred and Archon are having this epic duel, and they're just trading blows, and you see how powerful they both are, and Manfred, still having flesh, is taking a beating from this death magic, and he's literally on fire. and Arcan not having any flesh, like wearing clothing, his clothing is on fire, and you can just see like the level of power that both these guys have, and their two mounts are fighting, but they've both dismounted before this, and finally we see that Arcan is the greater of the two, and begins to beat Manfred down and knocks him sprawling, and is basically getting prepared to kill him, and the Lord Relictor manages to drive back the Banshees and uses his lightning and like imbues all the Stormcast weapons with lightning to where they're able to fight them off, and Tarsis goes charging over and attacks Arcan and is able to basically draw his attention enough that Manfred is able to regain his footing, and the two of them together are able to bring down Arcan, and so they strike him down, or Manfred does, and basically breaks him, and Manfred turns and starts talking, and Tarsis is like, basically saying like how dangerous this place is, and Tarsis is basically like, tell us what your real plot was, why did you bring us here? And all of a sudden they hear Arcan talking again, and Arcan's body just kind of lifts up, and he's like, you fool. And Manfred, like, did you really think that Nagash would let you win? This was merely a test to see if you'd learned anything in your time as an exile. And Manfred turns to Tarsis and is like, flee, we've got to get to a more defensible position. Nagash is coming. And then you hear Nagash's voice, and he says, no, little prince, I'm here. And you see this basically like fog roll in, and all of a sudden, like, it forms up into, like, Nagash the giant, and he and Manfred talk for a moment, and Manfred's kind of like, he's his typical self. If you're familiar at all with the old world, especially with the end times, like, Manfred is like a little whiny baby that is always trying to kind of like scheme and maneuver his way into stuff, and Nagash knows this, and Nagash is having none of it. Nagash is basically like, you're worthless, like, your schemes mean nothing to me, you can't buy my favor, you're just pathetic. And then Tarsis is like, we have come to deliver a message from Sigmar, and Nagash is like enraged, he's like, no, y'all are stolen from me by Sigmar, you belong to me, you've died, you're rightfully mine. And then he begins to attack the Stormcast. He begins by blasting this like black lightning bolt at Tarsis, which strikes him and just hurls him across the chamber back onto the bridge. And the other Stormcast charge forward, and basically no one's able to do anything except for the Lord Relictor, because he is more imbued by Sigmar's power than anybody else, and he's actually able to land like one or two blows on Nagash, but the most he's able to do is have Nagash literally take one step backwards. Like, he does nothing beyond that to Nagash, and then Nagash is just like, boop, you're frozen in place. And all the Stormcasters are dying, their souls are not able to escape. Like, Tarsis is able to see them from the floor, and he looks up, and their souls are suspended in midair. The little, the blue, like, lightning of their souls, and he realizes that Nagash is powerful enough to hold them in place, and he's not going to let them go. And so Manfred comes over, and it's like, you're still alive, I can't believe it. And Manfred basically helps him up and says, you remind me of someone I once knew. In honor of him, I want to help you escape, and then my debt to him will be done. And Tarsis basically says, I know who you're talking about. I am that man. I am Tarsim of Hellstone, who you fled from before. Because a little bit earlier in the story, Tarsis remembers that in the fight, whenever he died the first time, that Manfred, being the coward that he is, had turned tail and run, and that was what had led to the fall of Hellstone, was because without Manfred, the forces of the dead just weren't, guided and orderly, and just crumbled with Manfred gone, with, not there to guide them and reinforce them and bring them back again and again and again. So Hellstone had fallen, and Tarsim had died and been reforged as Tarsis. And basically he says, I've come here with a mission. I'm not going to leave until I see it through. And Manfred, of course, being a coward, leaves again. And Tarsis returns to the battle, and Nagash basically is finished off all the Stormcast. And Tarsis is just trying to figure out how he can let let his brethren free from Nagash's clutches, and he devises his plan, and he is able to distract Nagash just enough that all the others are able to go free, including the Lord Relictor's soul. And Nagash is outraged by this and basically like turns to attack Tarsis, and Tarsis like grabs his hammer because his blade gets knocked aside down into the canyon underneath this bridge, and he runs up this like big stone step, and he leaps in the air with his warhammer raised, and he's like in mid swing to hit Nagash, and Nagash just turns and lifts a hand, and boom, Tarsis is gone, just utterly obliterated, and that's it. Tarsis is dead, and then we end the series much as we began it, with a monologue by, well, I guess this isn't real. It is a monologue by Nagash, but he's addressing Tarsis' spirit now. And he says to Tarsis, "You have failed. You are mine now. Your puny little god king, Sigmar, will, is nothing to me. I will torment your soul, piece by piece, and not allow you any kind of peace until I have all the information I want, and I learn all of Sigmar's secrets, including how the Stormcasts are made, and how I can reclaim what's rightfully mine. And my faithful Mortarks are gathering my 999 legions, and we will wage war first into our realm, and then into the others, and all will be mine," and is basically what he says. And then it draws to a close. Like, basically curtain falls. And so we've come to the end of the first audio drama series that GW's put out on Age of Sigmar, and I have to say, I really, really enjoyed it. I'm a little bit sad for Tarsis. I really like Tarsis. He and Vandus are definitely my two favorites in terms of the Lord Celestants. Tarsis has been from the beginning. Vandus has grown on me as I've seen the character develop. I'm a bit of a sucker for a happy ending, but I know in the Warhammer world, clearly that doesn't always happen. I mean, we had the entire old world die to Chaos's hands. And who knows, we could see Tarsis again one day, but at least his death wasn't in vain. He saved his brethren, and they were able to return to Azir to be reforged by Sigmar. What I do find really interesting, and I am really excited for, is potentially what this could mean in terms of upcoming product releases for the Death faction. Honestly, I would not be surprised at all if we saw, maybe in Q2 of this year, at the earliest, a campaign book or whatever that was focused around the realm of death and around the death forces and Nagash's awakening and rising to power, because, as he says at the end of his book, his legions are basically ready to go. He's ready to begin waging war against Chaos and take back what is his. And we begin to see that death is really not allied with anyone. This is really, we have the four kind of factions within the game. We have Order, Chaos, Death, and Destruction. We don't know that much about Destruction right now, but what we do know is that, Order is basically the good guys, Chaos is basically the bad guys, and Death is really that third force that is allied with no one and can kind of tilt a battle either way, but is just as happy to fight either side. And one of the other stories that was released not too long ago that I haven't reviewed yet, but I will soon, we actually see the Death faction that end up fighting against both the Stormcast and Chaos forces at different points in the story. So it'll just be interesting to see how the narrative kind of continues to develop with the Death faction. And really, do they end up picking a side, or do they truly end up being a third force, until Destruction is really more fully introduced to the story, that kind of forms, like a triangle of, I guess, of, politics and of the war and all. So I'm really interested. I'm really excited to see what comes next. But that draws this one to a close. Stay tuned for the next narrative review. I really look forward to it, and to seeing what happens next. But until next time, this is James, and happy gaming.